You ever have a game from childhood that no one seems to really talk about? But then when they do, it's just how they don't remember it at all. So when you go back to that said game and try to play it for yourself, you're hit with the realization that maybe the game you once loved wasn't so great. I was sitting scrolling through xtwitter.com X, and I saw a tweet of someone saying how they often forget that Super Mario 3D Land even exists half the time. Well, how could that be? It was such a good technical showcase on how the 3DS's whole gimmick could be justified. So as any sane and rational person would do, I would go and 100% the game in order to prove that this game right here isn't as forgettable as a lot of people tend to say. And that's when the nightmare started.
Thing that I can't mess up. I need to do it. I need to get up these blocks. I need to do it. I can't miss the jump.
Oh, okay. Oh, it wasn't real. Fuck! Context. Super Mario 3D Land is one of those games that had a lot of hype around it. This was coming off the popularity of Super Mario Galaxy 2, a game so beloved that people refused to pay for it. So when the 3DS was trying to find a purpose to even exist, this game was being pushed as the case for how 3D gaming could actually work. I mean, shit, it's in the title. Put the glasses on! I remember keeping my gross sweaty eyeballs on this game, just following it super heavily and being so struck with the idea of a full-fledged 3D Mario title on a portable device. I mean, sure, Super Mario 64 DS did exist, but that was a remake, and it gives me hemorrhoids. This new game actually doesn't look like a visual representation of an MP3 compression. It looks on par with newer games. This new idea for a new 3D Mario game that will be in 3D all on a portable device will surely be boring. It's kind of boring.
How could you say that?
Computer, I'm allowed to have opinions, even if those opinions aren't popular.
Do people have the opposite opinion?
People don't really talk about this game. Like, ever. I don't even remember people talking about this game when it was a newly born. Super Mario 3D Land is like its own anomaly. People will acknowledge its existence, but refuse to elaborate on what kind of game it actually really is. And for the longest time, I was like, how? This game was revolutionary in the lifespan of the 3DS. It was a new type of 3D Mario. Those are the only 2 points that this game has to its name. Look, I'm no saint, but the minute I beat this game was the minute that everything about it left my small, tiny little brain. And this has bugged me for years now. How is it that a major Mario release on a major platform can just not be talked about? So I set out to do one thing that no man has ever done before in their life. Prove that this game right here is worth talking about in some capacity by 100%ing it. And I'm doing it in the only way I know how. I played the game. Were you expecting more of a challenge? Because I'll be honest, playing this game was challenging enough, but not because it was hard, but more because of what I stated earlier. It's just a boring game. Everything from the story that doesn't exist, and the personality that doesn't exist, and the art style, which does exist. But it doesn't really do much outside of solid color blocked in the sky. Seriously, what was with the trend of making Mario so bland around this time? You put him in a game that has so much spectacle, you forget it runs on a shittier GameCube. You do water it down for the next release, but at least it's still looking amazing. And then you just say, what if the game was so flat we needed the console to be in 3D just to give it some depth? The irony's amazing, because the game has such flat lighting that the only shadows to ever exist in the game are the ones that are underneath Mario when he jumps. Now that wouldn't be a problem, except that every block, wall, floor, sky, or anything that's a surface or not has zero shading or detail to it at all. Imagine just for one moment that your desktop wallpaper is just one solid color. That's essentially what this game is. And while you could say that cell shading does a similar thing, to that I say, no it fucking doesn't. Because cell shading is a very specific rendering process that also renders things like shadows and surface detail. The style just so happens to be very colorful and slightly minimalist. This is the result of not being able to use any dynamic lighting on an underpowered console, and choosing an art style that needs that dynamic lighting in order to be, well, dynamic. And the next 3D Mario after this, Super Mario 3D World, retained that same art style, but looks and feels completely different because they can do more with the lighting per level. But this wouldn't be that much of an issue if it didn't affect gameplay. Remember when I said that the game is so flat that it needs a 3D console in order to give it some depth? Well, what do you think, I was exaggerating? Buddy, come on, I never exaggerate! I found platforming in Super Mario 3D Land to be very tricky. When you have a game like this that is three-dimensional, and the point is to play in 3D, you have to take into account the fact that not everyone's gonna want to play in dimension cubed. Because of the problem I stated earlier with art direction and everything, Super Mario 3D Land feels super flat, to the point where making jumps or understanding where the platform is in relation to Mario can be really hard to perceive. I mean, sure, Mario has a shadow to help, but whatever! happens when I can't see the shadow? By far the worst offender of this are these sections where sliding up the 3D is heavily encouraged due to the fact that they fucked up the depth perception. The angle and lighting just makes it feel like I'm looking at a bad optical illusion. Everything feels like it's on the same plane of existence. And don't you be telling me that the 3D is meant for this section, because I slid that thing up, I played it in 3D, and you know what it did? It did absolutely fucking nothing. They even knew this wasn't the greatest idea because I counted two times that this ever happened in the game. Way to show your confidence, Dad! It makes power-ups like the Tanuki suit almost a necessity, but almost a necessity, because each of these eye-popping levels are designed to be beaten without any power-ups, and while they can help along the way, that's all they're really meant for, is help. Hello, yes? I would like another therapy session. The voices came back. This might not be the biggest of deals, but let me ask you this. When was the last time a 3D Mario game gave you classic power-ups but didn't make them super situational or mandatory? Oh, wait. None. I'm not even joking. 3D Mario always had a hard time constructing levels that couldn't be entirely broken without certain power-ups. The closest we ever got before this point was the Cloud Flower from Super Mario Galaxy 2, a power-up that could sometimes only be used for help. This is because for the longest of times, these levels were so open and non-linear. How do you implement power-ups in these types of stages without completely breaking the level design? While they did eventually figure this out later, it's clear that it's as easy as training your dog how to rob a bank. So, Super Mario 3D Land makes the levels insanely linear. And if I'll be completely honest, it's a really interesting take on a 3D platformer. Because 3D platformers, at least nowadays, are usually always about the world! Look at this cool place you get to fuck around in! But after a while, the idea of world after big world after world after world after dear God, please stop! And Nintendo knew this. They wanted to take the approach of making a 3D Mario game in the same way that they would make a 2D Mario game. Is that helping the case of your game feeling flat, man? I remember this oddly being a big selling point for 3D Land. A 3D game with the philosophy of a 2D game, and honestly, I really like this idea. Linearity isn't inherently a bad thing when it's designed from the get-go. 3D games that force linearity when they promise the opposite feels like going to the dentist for a checkup and ending up getting a colonoscopy. But here, you know what you're getting. I wanted the colonoscopy, and I appreciate the different approach because it does honestly work. Because taking the focus off of a big open world means that the levels themselves become the main focus. And the designs of the levels are catering more towards platforming challenges instead of believable worlds that someone could live in. So with that comes very well-designed levels, but not memorable levels.
Maybe you just have a bad memory.
I can assure you my memory is fine, thank you very much. I only ever left my kid at the playground twice.
Didn't he die?
My lawyer has advised me not to answer that question. But the answer is yes. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, these levels feel super basic. The reusing of constant assets and a very bland art style makes it so that these levels blend together so much. None of them have any memorable set pieces, and if they do, these set pieces don't stay for too long. Kinda like my child. And if they do try to make it a bit different, it's something we've seen a million times. I don't care about the 8-bit Mario anymore, Dad! Probably one of the only things I ever remembered about this game was the fact that you can go behind a waterfall in one of the levels, and that's super cool. But I'd be lying if I said there isn't an argument to be made that going through the game on separate playthroughs is more fresh because of the forgetful nature of the level design. And that'd be true if the levels themselves weren't just boring. That's like, what, the third time I've said that without explaining it?
It's actually the second.
Okay, maybe I should go to the doctor for that instead of constantly getting colonoscopies. The worlds that these levels reside in do in fact have themes, but the levels tend to not follow those themes. Where do you think this level is in the game? If you said World 1, the grass world, you'd be wrong! It's actually World 8, the fucking lava world! The inconsistency between world and actual level is kind of amazing. Not even New Super Mario Bros. Did that. Something tells me that they had a hard time having these levels look super different from one another. So, to circumvent this, they kinda let loose on where certain level types would go. But the issue with that is that it makes it so these worlds now lack identity. Sure, the world map might look like this, but when the level looks like this, I start to wonder what the world of Mario is actually like. And right over here we have the beautiful grasslands. Now, be wary, because if you move just a little bit weird, shit, look what you did! So levels between entire worlds blend together, and it doesn't help that the levels that include bosses are in the same boat. But at least here, they do try a bit more, and that trying aids in the fact that these airship levels at the end of some worlds are just not fun in the slightest. It's due to the fact that they're auto-scrollers. I don't care if the world's moving around me, I refuse to walk! They also just feel so uninspired. It's an airship, but half the time the level feels no different from a normal level that doesn't have a boss. I do understand that it's a homage to Super Mario Bros. 3, but you don't have to make the homage to a T. The rare moment where the airships do feel more like a 3D level stands out a bit more, and it offers more of a challenge, but I wish there was just more to these levels. What about an entire fleet of airships you have to hop between? What about using the cannons on the ship to knock Mario in between them? What about doing anything interesting? The conversion from 2D to 3D is like changing your favorite color from the popular kids. Just because you did one thing differently doesn't make it entirely original. Yeah, this joke worked a lot better when the room wasn't blue. And this doesn't even get into the fact that the bosses are piss easy. You got Boom Boom here spinning around like a Beyblade, which in fact does not stop you from bouncing on his head. Pom Pom though is a bit easier because she just stands still and you can get infinite 1-ups if you jump on her shell during the half times. Now these guys are good as like halfway bosses or World 1 and 2 bosses. You fight them about 6 times each with almost no change in between fights. Why would they fucking do this? I wonder why no one remembers this game. I will say, when I played through the game again, the first 3 worlds were fine. I was actually enjoying my experience with the game, and I got confused as to how this game is just never brought up. But I quickly learned that this is all the game has to offer, and it becomes super repetitive. And I haven't even gotten to the end game stuff. The final level is actually pretty cool. It feels very intentional. The ending of the game as a whole has more attention to it than the whole game! There's charm here, a fake out gag that is not cringe, and a final fight that is not entirely boring. It heavily reminds me of Bowser's Star Reactor from Super Mario Galaxy, dodging Bowser's attack to try and make it to the end. And speaking of the end, it's great. The game doesn't get too dramatic. You rescue Peach and use the Tanuki suit to fly off into the sunset, something you actually can't do in the game at all. This game is really consistent at being inconsistent. And they lived happily ever... Luigi! What? Huh? There's more?! Well, if there's ever time to start drinking. 8 special worlds, unlockable Luigi, a homage to New Super Mario Bros. DS, and ultimately, this is the best part of the game. The levels within these special worlds can both be original levels or remixed levels from earlier worlds. This includes new time limits, different level conditions, being chased by a cosmic clone, and it makes these otherwise mediocre levels more challenging and by extension, more fun. Evading taxes wouldn't be such a hot commodity if the thrill of getting caught wasn't so fun. And they still think my name is Tom. But throwing in a new character to play as into the mix makes the game feel more refreshing and fun. They also get a bit more tricky with the star medals in this world. Throughout the game, there are 3 to collect in each stage, and they're not that hard to find until you get to this point in the game. You really have to think outside the box. Literally. These things will be in places you didn't think existed, and it really incentivizes exploration since having a high number of medals is required to access every stage in the game. Kind of like in New Super Mario Bros. Where you can buy more paths with star coins. But unlike that game, you're always keeping your star medals no matter if you spend them or not. And of course, if you collect them all, you get an award, which is actually very tedious to unlock and the bane of my existence. So you know how New Super Mario Bros. Wii has World 9 and you can only unlock levels if you collect every star coin in the game? So for this game, you unlock 1 level. We're doing like 10 times the work. Well, if there's ever time to start drinking. This is clearly padding, because not only do you have to get every star medal, but you also have to grab the top of every flagpole from every stage. And that's not all, because if you call right now, you'll also have to beat every level as both Mario and Luigi. Why? Did they think that this would be similar to Super Mario Galaxy, where when you get 120 stars, you get to go through the whole game again as Luigi? Or New Super Mario Bros. DS, where once you beat the game, you're given the cheat code to unlock Luigi? Because the difference with those games is that it acted like a new game plus. These were not there to unlock anything super important. It was a new way to play the game once you returned to it. And also, those games just had better replayability in the first place. However, here, it's not replaying the game. It's going through the previous levels you've already completed just to have the flagpole be an L and green instead of being M and red. And what do you get? You get the final level, a test of your strength and knowledge of the game itself. It's a level with no power-ups, no checkpoints, just you and a bunch of untextured blocks in the sky. It's like we never left World 1. It's pretty challenging, but not because of its level design. Okay, that's being too dramatic. The level itself is quite the challenge, but I found that time and time again, my death was because of every issue I stated, including this new one I found during my level playing experience. Sometimes Mario will just refuse to run, and I'm not being even a little bit silly when I say that. I've never been silly even in my life. I shit you not, I'll press the Y button, I'll hold down the Y button, I'll make passionate love to it, but Mario just ignores my efforts and instead does his measly Sunday walk half the time. Dude, I need to make crucial jumps, can you pick up the pace please? It's so annoying, and it was at this moment right here where I badly just wanted to give up. Super Mario 3D Land is is by far the most basic white bitch Mario game to ever be made. The game looks plain as hell, relies on one gimmick to carry its whole personality, it overstays their welcome at the function, and on top of all of that, it refers and brings up plenty of things from when they peaked. Ladies, gentlemen, and all non-binary people alike, Super Mario 3D Land is the new Super Mario Brothers of 3D Mario. People are not going to like me anymore.
Did they ever?
It's debatable. This game just feels like a glorified tech demo. They played it safe because the 3DS needed something to boost its sales, so they wanted to try and recreate the magic that was New Super Mario Bros. On the DS. Whereas that game took Mario back to its roots as a 2D platformer and modernized it while giving its own charm and personality, this game does the opposite. It rethinks what 3D Mario can be, but does it in a way that limits it to a point of feeling super bare bones. And honestly, if Super Mario 3D World didn't exist, then things might have been different. But that game does everything this does, but so much better. It has identity and sticks with its themes, for the most part. And in my opinion, finishes what this game sets out to do. And Super Mario Odyssey took 3D Mario in a much needed direction of expanding Mario's moveset and giving him new ways to power up. While Bowser's Fury over there shows that Mario games can still be platformers and very non-linear. Super Mario 3D Land didn't do anything super remarkable, but it's still an important footnote within the mainline titles. Because without this game right here, we wouldn't see a lot of the stuff that the Mario series has today. This was the first game to really be super cartoony, and it's something that the series has stuck with even to this day. It showed that classic power-ups throughout the series can be used within the 3D space, and even introduced new ones that have stayed to this day. And it showed that you can indeed make a forgettable Mario game. I mean, why would you even play this game when A, B, and C exist now? But for a time, it was fun to have a nice little experiment, but it was one that people weren't all too fond of. When 3D World was announced, people loathed the idea, and for a while, people didn't like that game too much either. But looking back at 3D Land, it's such a much lesser experience, and one that's very hard to go back to. I don't think I'll ever pick up this game again, and to be honest, not because I don't like it, but because there's almost no substance to this game. What you see on the surface level is basically what you're gonna get, and through all my efforts, through all my adventure, through every problem that I have with this game, all I have to do now is not miss the top of this flagpole. Well, if there's ever time to sign up for an AA meeting,